Are you stuck on lap time or a plateau, or you're having a hard time being consistent? Maybe you complain about the sim, your force feedback isn't telling you anything, but you just lack knowledge on mechanical grip and body roll in the car. And this video will explain what body roll is, how tires lose and build up grip, and how to make tweaks to change balances in your car so you can actually enjoy sim racing a hell of a lot more, instead of complaining about, oh, force feedback. I've been sim racing for years, have built multiple car setups across different simulators. I have built the complete car setup guide, The Art of Car Setups, and this video is gonna help you out to understand mechanical grip and how to tweak it. Let's go. So first, to understand this video properly, we first need to think about tire load. So if you have a tire that is in the air, it doesn't have grip, and when we put it on the road surface, it has grip. But it's not that simple. Think about, like, if I push the tire into the road surface, it gets more grip, but it has a fall-off effect. So the harder we push the tire into the tarmac, yes, the more grip we have, but the less effective it will be. So think about, you increase the traction by pushing tire load on it, and you can see here, you can pause the video and read these texts, but then you get a steep drop off and drop off and drop off. And this is handled differently in different simulators, but to some extent, this is always happening to the tires on the mechanical grip. So the slower end corners and low downforce cars have this effect. This is going to be vital for the rest of the video to understand this phenomenon, because that will explain so much in your car, in your driving, in everything. Imagine when you corner the car hard into a corner and you have a lot of load on the outside tire, for instance, then you're gonna have some high tire load on that tire. Okay, so that means that the rubber is squishing and it's deforming under pressure, and that will reduce the grip. So the more force the tire needs to pick up, the less effective the tire becomes. Okay, so what does this all mean then if you have body roll into the mix and tire overload, and how does that work? If I would remove all suspension from the car, and we would remove or we would stiffen up the front anti-roll bar for this example, you can see how we have a car that has a load transfer while cornering, and the car is staying really flat on the track, and you can see why this kind of wants to create load on this tire. Okay, so this load on this tire is now extremely high. What does this then now mean? Well, it kind of breaks down under this pressure. And obviously, different corners, different car types, different tire models will give a nuance to how this feels, but to some extent this is happening. The other downside effect, however, is that this wheel, the inner wheel, because we have this load transfer, this tire is not really cooperating while cornering. So how to think about this? Now you could say to yourself, well, then that should be really bad, right? If this wheel is so red and hard and having all this pressure, but there's an upside to this. And this is the bar here underneath here. This is where the airflow and aerodynamics go. If we have super stiff anti-roll bars on the front, typically you'll find on a lot of articles on the internet and people that make race cars or whatever, that we have a very stable aerodynamic platform. And this is complementary to fast corner behavior. What if we loosen up the suspension? What if we did a soft anti-roll bar in the car? What does that mean? Well, it means that when we corner now the car, because we have a soft anti-roll bar, the tires, the inner, this left side and the right side, are more free from each other. And what this creates is that this tire now has to pick up less load, making it more effective, and the inner tire has more load, which also complements the grip on the front end, on the mechanical grip. So a click of anti-roll bar, softer, gets rid of understeer this way. And it is really a significant change for a lot of cars in a lot of sims, because you can see how this one is now has less force, less burden, less overload, being more effective, and this tire helping out more. So you'll see on some cars on the sim that I'm particularly driving a lot, that when you go very soft on anti-rollbar, you get a very oversteery car. So think about this, and there are different cars treating this differently. So think about when you're entering corners and you have a little bit of a oversteer every time. Think about that these fronts are gripping a lot. So to make an example of front anti-roll bar, as I'm entering this corner with a stiff anti-roll bar like I have on this car, you can see that my inputs, as I'm inputting, there's not a lot of emotion on how the car goes from left to right or leaning. So you can see how stiff a little bit this car is. You see a small movement. You could argue if this is a realistic movement, but this car has a really safe front end, because the Chevrolet Corvette is kind of like oversteery beast. So if I would now make a very soft anti-roll bar, I will give you an example. Now I want to show you in the Lamborghini how more body roll looks like, because this car just does that more. You can better see it. So you can see that this car has a lot of roll. And this is like how the car a little bit is. So you can see on this car that it takes a little bit longer before my input is being responded. So you can see how this car is rolling, and you can make a prediction that these inside tires helps the car corner better. So that is something you can start to notice in your driving when you use the steering wheel and you enter corners and you feel like, hey, on this car, now all of a sudden, this car is very reactive and I can really feel the car pointing into the corner, where others, it takes a longer time and the run-up effect, and this slugginess of a soft anti-roll bar is like setting the car in a more determined trajectory, which could make it oversteer and feel sluggish and unresponsive with a front soft anti-roll bar. Now, hey, if you like this content this far, could you please hit that like button? That really helps me out. And also leave a comment, like, what do you think of these videos? What are your opinions about this? Because I'm constantly improving them and your feedback has been key to improving it. So thanks for that. The anti-roll bar is not only contributing to the roll of the car. We have different things that will influence roll. And that is the packer distance, or spring travel, bump stop range, or like spring range in general. The longer the range we have on the spring travel, meaning 0 packers, the more body roll we have. Another thing is the spring rates, wheel rates, spring stiffness. If you're in a different sim, more spring stiffness will reduce the roll as well, and softer springs will add even more body roll to the car. So they are all contributing to roll. So imagine stiffest anti-roll bar, stiffest springs, and shortest amount of spring travel. Now you get rid of all the body roll you have in the front of the car. So think about when you stiffen everything up to the max, then now we just created a very, very high overload factor on the outer tire in corners, which gives us massive amounts of understeer. I would always try to get a bunch of like travel as much as possible to get more mechanical grip. By the way, this Corvette setup pack that I've created, I got a lot of positive reviews on this. By the way, my whole store has been upgraded, not updated, but upgraded to specific levels. So you pick a level 4, let's say, level 4. Now this setup has less ride height, it has a little bit of a different type of suspension and ride heights, which makes it more challenging to drive. So with brake bias sliders and different preloads and whatever. So I created these car setups like for myself as well to have like more oversteer and understeery setups that I can pick from as a baseline. So have a look. Okay, but what about rear anti-roll bars then? And I think they're also very important. And rear anti-roll bars is a lot about the exit. Later in the video, I will also show you just if you take any like default setup or whatever, you could just use anti-roll bars to get the car to feel different. And I will, in the end of the video, I will also talk about how this anti-roll bar setup is kind of like influencing your brake bias, TC settings, and all that good stuff. So first, let's talk about the rear anti-roll bar. And by the way, assuming that we use the same front and rear anti-roll bar, again, if you have a very stiff rear anti-roll bar, which I don't recommend for every sim that I've driven, I've never found a car that needed a lot of stiffness in the rear anti-roll bar. And I will explain you why. So the biggest problem with a stiff rear anti-roll bar, as we have, let's say we have some banking on a track, for instance. If we have banking on tracks, or like you got the track like, you know, the banking corners on, let's say, Zandvoort or something, you'll have like all these elevation changes. And stiff rear anti-roll bars just robs the rear of traction, which again makes this outside tire overload hard and makes the inside tire unload a lot as well. And imagine when this tire is searching for traction and this tire is like overloaded a lot and you hit the throttle, then this inside tire wants to like spin a lot, and this one will go outside of the grip circle and makes you oversteer. However, with the soft anti-roll bar, again, you got this body roll effect created again. And what this now does is that it's gonna help the inside tire. So if we have some banking on track, then the soft rear anti-roll bar gives a lot of traction. 9 out of 10 times, we typically aim for a little bit softer rear anti-roll bar because it gives a planted feel on the rear of the car. Now, for instance, on Le Mans Ultimate, I found with the Porsche and with the McLaren, like I run typically a detached rear anti-roll bar. You will see this on a lot of hypercars as well. I really like that setting because it gives that planted feel on the exit. But there is another issue, because how do the rear and front anti-roll bars now relate to each other? How can we make the car act out in a lot of different ways using these different sliders? By the way, again, spring stiffness on the rear will also contribute to this roll and this like traction we're searching for, but springs do also a lot of stuff with aerodynamics, but I'm just ignoring that for now to avoid complexity. So let's talk about the relationship then with anti-roll bar stiffness compared to front and the back. Okay, so we're not doing this stuff, okay? We're not doing understeer, oversteer. We're gonna talk about this balance you'll feel, okay? Between stiffness, front and rear. So think about when this car is now cornering, this box represents, this yellow box represents load transfer, and you have a front anti-roll bar of 20%, so that is pretty soft, and we have a rear anti-roll bar of 70%. Now this example shows braking and cornering, okay? So we're going that way. What this means with the soft anti-roll bar, less overload on this front tire, so it works more effective. The inside is really helping a lot, all right? So the car is pitching forward and leaning to this side with the body roll. But when we have a stiff anti-roll bar, then this wheel might be up in the air. You'll see this on this front engine cup cars, you know, they lift up the tire sometimes because these cars just understeering monsters with the engine in front and all that car dynamic stuff. So that means that this tire is up in the air. It creates a lot of rotation in the car, but it will help these front tires to grip better. However, if you go with the soft anti-roll bar, if you have a soft anti-roll bar on the back and a stiff one on the front, now we get this planted feel, like I explained before, and we have all this overload on this front tire. So as we corner and braking now, the front tire, this one, need to pick up all the load. And here you get this massive understeer. However, I'm running a lot of times these type of settings because it gives me so much predictability and it gives me so much direct feeling on my steering wheel. But Arnoud, how do I get to now to rotate the car, because I have all this softness and my cars just don't want to steer out of corners. It's so understeery all the time. By the way, if you like these kinds of images, I have 110 more of this. This is a part of the Art of Car Setups, the Ultimate Car Setup Building Guide. It is perfect for Le Mans Ultimate. It's great for ACC, but you can also use it to expand your knowledge in car setups 10 times faster than I learned it. So have a look in the description. So how do we get rotation then? Well, very simple. You add a bunch of ride height on the rear. Now in this particular car is pretty extreme, and you can argue all day if this is the right setting. So I will show you some examples now how you can think about this and carry this to your builds or whatever. But also glance over this screen when you're on fixed series or you don't care about setups. You can always have a look at, hey, what is the anti-rollbar of this car? If it's like 12 or is it 0? Think about it. So let's talk about something that I used to do and that really helps me out. By the way, if you want to have that planted feel on entry, you want to have that direct steering and you don't want to be killed every time, imagine like a stiffer front anti-roll bar like I explained before. Maybe you want to add some spring stiffness. This is also contributes to a stiffer front and more stability, but also aerodynamically it's going to be more forgiving as you enter corners. By the way, if we can get... let me know in the comments if you want to get a video that is all about the springs, because it is a part of this, but else this video will just be way too long. So let's just keep it simple. So think about this. Let's say we go detached first. We think about this. So think about we have the 70% of stiffness. This would represent stiffness. This one do on P1. And let's talk about the rake. Now, because we have soft rear springs, we have soft rear anti-roll bar, we get a planted feel on the rear end of the car, which allows us to use a pretty much low brake bias because it's so stable, so we can have more traction on the rear. So we pushing more of this brake pressure to the rear tires, helping to stop the car better. To balance this out, we have also more rear ride height, so we have a car that is pitching quite a lot, and that will give the rotation in the fast bends. Then, when I'm in a fast bend and I want to stop the car safely, the stiff springs will help me with the stability, and the rake of the car helps me with rotation in high speed corners. Then I'll add a little bit of negative toe. Again, sometimes this is absolutely a nightmare to use. On this car, I found it really useful. On some other cars, it's useful. There are other cars that it's not useful, so you need to test this out. But by the way, a little bit of a side note here on the choices that I made on this particular setup. For instance, for the really smart people, you could go less ride height. You could go, again, softer springs. And you could go with less stiffness anti-roll bar, and now you got just more body roll in the car with less rake. That is also a way to set up the car. It's whatever you like. This is probably more complementary to very slow corner behavior, with the trade-off of being a little bit more understeery on high speed. I mean, this is the great setup puzzle that I like to solve, which I like to explore. The downside of doing this: stiffer spring rates, very stiff front anti-roll bars. It would overload the tires to a great extent. And when you overload tires, meaning the tire now needs to pick up all the loads, all the shocks, all the bumps, whatever, it would be nice if we could have a bunch of tire heat as an effect. So if you would do this in real life, I think it would overheat the front tires to a great degree. But not in Le Mans Ultimate. And I'm not sure, ACC, I believe, did it a little bit, but it's a bit of a distant memory becoming, because I'm not really playing that anymore. But imagine that if they truly simulate it properly, which might be very hard, it would overheat the front tires, and it would like also create maybe more wear as well. But that's not the case currently. So you can just take over the settings. I have some free setups as well, also in the description. Have a look at some tryouts. Now you can add this understanding to this next video where I explain the grip circle, how brake bias in a hypercar works, but you can also use it for different car behaviors. So if you can understand the grip circle better, you can also understand like how far you can push your car into different corners, how different inputs are affecting your lap time in multiple ways. So that video is right up here. Thanks for watching.